Hello, my name is Danielle. I am currently a student studying Masters in Counseling at Alliance Graduate School. And this video is my report with one of my classmates at Illyrio in our subject called Counseling for Trauma and Abuse. And I'm just sharing this for anyone who would be also interested to know more about CISD, so that is Critical Incident Stress Debriefing. This is our report from our trauma and abuse class. So some of the sources I'll also be sharing later on. So yeah, let's begin. Okay, so what is Critical Incident Stress Debriefing? Hope you can see my screen. Yeah. Okay, but let's first define what are critical incidents. Critical incidents are important, often stressful events which have the potential to overwhelm one's usual coping mechanisms, resulting in psychological distress and an impairment of normal individual, as well as collective adaptive functioning. So basically, there are basic types of critical incidents, which are emergencies, disasters, and catastrophes. Well, so this kind of debriefing was originally made for those who are respondents, such as policemen, nurses, especially those who are like in the frontliners. But now it is also used for people who experiences any stressful events or any like natural disaster like flood, eruption. So this is basically open for anyone who has gone through these kinds of critical incidents. So some of other people may confuse CISM, which is Critical Incident Stress Management, with CISD. So just to differentiate that, CISM is a comprehensive, integrated, systematic, and multi-component crisis intervention program. It is actually the whole in which CISD is just a part of. So there are 7 core components for this, which is one would be the pre-crisis preparation. Second is the demobilization and staff consultation. 3 is diffusing, and then 4 is the CISD. There's also individual crisis intervention, family CISM, and the follow-up referral. So this particular video is just focusing on the CISD. So CISD is not any of these forms. It's not psychotherapy, it's not professional counseling, it's also not a treatment or cure for PTSD or post traumatic stress disorder, but it is a debriefing that can help prevent PTSD. It is also not a critic of the incident. It's not an investigative tool. It's not an organizational problem-solving process, and it is not a standalone process. CISD is a more structured 7-phase group crisis intervention process used to facilitate psychological closure and recovery. So with the title itself, debriefing, this is a 7-phase group crisis intervention. And it is also an intervention which assists victim survivors, usually from those that deal positively with the emotional effects of critical incidents, such as, like what I mentioned earlier, floods, eruptions, or any natural disasters. And then we also provide education about current and anticipated stress responses and stress management techniques through this debriefing. Rationale of CISD, it lowers tension and mitigate a small group's reaction to a traumatic event. So usually this is, what will help people be processed after a traumatic event has happened. It is also a facilitation of normal recovery processes of normal people within a small group who are having normal reactions to an abnormal event. So this means that by normal is not every people, normal people, excluding those who are actually going through clinical or like mental illnesses. So yeah, these are basically just people who have gone through an abnormal event, such as like, yeah, natural disasters. And then there's also an identification of people within a group who might be in need of additional individual support. So when this debriefing is being conducted, there might be some people who may need some more additional support, or in some cases a referral for a professional psychotherapy. And then it's also used to educate, normalize reactions, and hopefully prevent PTSD from occurring. So again, everybody a lot of people, whether those who have illnesses or not, can go through any kind of uh, critical incidents. So this is really to help those to prevent PTSD from occurring. So who can conduct CISD? So this is the team. There's the provider or the debriefer. Then there's also the mental health professional. It's always required that at least someone who knows how to deal with mental health issues is there to assist. Then there's also the team leader and the doorkeeper. And doorkeeper are those who would be assigned for the people who's like going to and out of the session. Okay, now can anyone be allowed to conduct CISD? So actually, in order for you to conduct CISD, you need to have training and certificate, in which there is this organization called International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, Inc. So there's international training that you can go to, and then here in the Philippines, the DSWD is giving Philippine training and certification for CISD. Who can participate CISD? So it can anyone small. It's a small homogeneous group who have experienced the same traumatic experience. So like, let's say for example, in a flood, there may be a flood happens in a particular time. So you can't put groups together who did not experience the same event. So the group has to be in the same place where the same event happened. And it's also composed of small group who completed its mission. So like, let's say when it comes to soldiers, right? Sometimes those soldiers are still not done with their mission. So you cannot facilitate CISD with those who have not yet finished their current mission, or like the experience is currently happening. It has to be after. Usually, the group composes of 6 to 8 members. So it's also depending on the need, but that's the ideal number. Then when to conduct CISD? In our research, you can conduct CISD 24 and 72 hours after a traumatic event. And then you can also do it 3 to 7 weeks after the disaster. But our professor recently just told us that today, like in recent studies, it's more preferable that you conduct CISD several weeks after the disaster, because most of the people who have gone through natural disaster would prefer to get the basic needs such as food, clothing, more than a debriefing. So once those needs have been met, then CISD can come into place. So usually now it can be 6 to 7 weeks. It's better if it's done during those duration after the disaster. And then where can you conduct CISD? You can conduct it somewhere comfortable, and then there's also somehow privacy, and it's also accessible. Usually CISD is being requested by companies who might have their employees experience a traumatic event. Like, let's say for example, there was a bank robbery. So maybe the employees may need some debriefing for them to avoid any kind of trauma, or so that it will help them, it will help them prevent um, experiencing any traumas. And then, how long does CISD take? It's usually 1 to 3 hours, but it's also depending on these two primary factors, which are the number of people in the group and the intensity of the traumatic event. So usually, of course, some people would prefer to share shorter, or some would prefer to talk longer. So it's really depending on also the number of the people and the pacing, and as well as the intensity of the traumatic event. Okay, so before I get into the 7-step phase model, so just other additional information is that CISD is mostly well, based from our research, it's where I forgot what I was gonna say, but no, I'll get back to it later. I forgot. Okay, let's first get into the 7-step phase model. Okay, the first one is called the introduction. The introduction is where you introduce yourself, you let the participants introduce themselves, then you describe the process. Usually this is where you're orienting them what's going to happen throughout the next hours. Then you explain the purpose of why they're having this. Then you also lay out basic guidelines, like maybe they can't use the phone, or what should take place if while the session is ongoing. Then you'd also clarify expectations about those things, that it's not a therapy, if there needs to be an individual counseling, so this is not the avenue for that. So now I remember, that was what I was going to share. So it's not also that's why it's called debriefing, because it's for that certain service. So if they want therapy or counseling, then that is another service that they're going to have to avail. So that's the first phase, which is the introduction. And the second phase is the fact phase, which describes a traumatic event from each participant's perspective on a cognitive level. This usually focuses on the facts, as it is said, as it is mentioned there. It's the fact phase. Huge questions here can include who arrived first, what happened, who came in next, can you tell me what happened, where were you when the incident occurred, what were you doing, how did you first know something was wrong. So usually some of the people there would also complete a story. So like let's say let's say a bank robbery happened in a bank. So some of them would also mention an information that another would add to. So something like that. And then, so after the fact phase, you move toward the thought phase, which is where you describe their cognitive reactions concerning the incident and transitioning to the emotional reactions. For example, you can say something like, I'd like to describe what your first thoughts were in response to what happened. What were your thoughts when you saw what was happening? What was going through your head? What was the first thought you had when you went off autopilot? When you finally had a chance to think about the situation, what entered your mind? And is there some thought that keeps recurring after this event? So basically, you're just going to be focused on what their thoughts were, and maybe also what their thoughts were before the event happened. Okay, now we move on to the fourth phase, which is the reaction or feeling phase. This is where we help people identify the most traumatic part of the experience. We help them recognize the strong emotions that accompany their experience. So, some of these people may be confused and may feel like maybe it's not normal to feel a certain way. So this is basically where we validate them and normalize and legitimize whatever their feeling is. So some of these the questions you can ask here are what was the worst part of the experience for you personally? when this happened, how did you feel? What was it like for you? What did you feel at that time? What are you feeling now? Okay, then the fifth phase is the symptom phase. This is where we transition to cognitive from feeling domain. So since you have already talked about their feelings, you'd want them to go back to the cognitive now, and you help them describe the cognitive, physical, behavioral, emotional, spiritual, and other signs of signals of distress the participants were or are experiencing. You're trying to look now if maybe there are symptoms that are happening within them. Maybe some of them can't eat well or are having issues with their health. Maybe a certain body part is hurting, or somewhere along their emotional state. So you can ask these questions for you to know, like what physical and psychological reactions have you noticed? Have you experienced any signs of distress since this happened? What are some of the stress responses you've experienced? Could it be that you experienced such and such? Okay, now we go on to the sixth phase, which is the teaching or educational phase. And this is where we provide explanations and guidance regarding stress and stress management. We're basically helping them and educating them so they would know what to do regarding the symptoms that we have seen or they're experiencing. Then this is also helping the person to alert a person to a future anxiety. So maybe some of them may have experienced trauma, or maybe they might develop trauma in the future. So now you're going to help them face any future anxiety. And then this is also when you suggest self-care activities such as exercising, structuring their time, sharing their feelings with others, then also journaling. And if they're also Christians, you can suggest doing quiet time. So this is an example of how you help them alert to future anxiety. So like in a robbery setting, which door did he come in, and how will you react when you hear that door slam? Since the robbery occurred Thursday at 11 o'clock, how might you respond next Thursday at 11 o'clock? Okay, now we go to the last one, which is the reentry phase. This is a time to answer and summarize what was covered. It's also a time when psychological closure is likely to occur. It should end only when the majority has returned to the cognitive domain. So we also need to be sensitive if others are still in the feeling domain. And maybe some of them would be sharing, like maybe some of them would already be overwhelmed by their feelings. So if there is a need for them to have an individual counseling, maybe they can be taken out from the group. So yeah, we need to help them before we do the closure, before we summarize what was covered. We need to also help them return back to the cognitive domain. So one example of this is what has emerged from this group tonight seems to be a theme of frustration and lost control. Another suggestion you can say is a common question that arises from incidents such as this is, why did this incident affect me when so many others have not been affected? From listening to the group today, the answer that has emerged seems clear. So those are the 7 phases. So I'll be giving a demonstration for you to better understand how it's being done. But first of all, these are the sources. So we got it from the Book of Fright and Everly Mitchell. Then those are some of the things that you can also look at. You can also look at some YouTube videos. So mostly this report is, this video is actually just a really quick run through this process, because I just wanted to use it for reference. And so now I would like to demonstrate particularly I would like to demonstrate the script I came up with this process. So I'll just look for Okay, so I'll just be going through this very quickly as if I'm just conducting it without, a partner. And let's just pretend that in this scenario, the group of people I'm debriefing just came from a massive flood several weeks ago. Okay? All right, so I'll be starting. Demonstration begins now. Okay, phase one is the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel with Alliance Graduate School. We are here. We are a group of counselors and mental health professionals who help people deal with their emotional traumas. Obviously, we are here right now because you have been through a flood incident which happened several weeks ago. In this process, you will be undergoing 7 phases, and I will be guiding you through it as we come along. Okay? Right now, we are in phase one, which is the introduction. Just to have some ground rules here, this is not therapy nor an investigation. We are here to talk about the experiences all of you are having right now. This is also voluntary, so for those who do not want to share, you may opt not to do so, but we highly encourage you as this will be beneficial for you. I also request all of you to keep everything shared here confidential. What is said here stays here. Could you all agree on that? If there is a need for you to go out for valid reasons, you may also do so, but you are also encouraged to come back. May I also request everyone to turn off their cell phones? I'll give you a minute to do that. Again, this is to help you deal with the emotional traumas that has happened to you recently. This may solicit feelings of distress, which is normal, and that is part of the healing process. Even as you share, others can benefit from it and can also be part of the healing process. Do you have any questions regarding this point? Then let's start now by introducing ourselves, starting from me. Okay, phase two, fact phase. Now we'll move along to the second phase, which is the fact phase. Since we want to know where each one is coming from, I would like to ask what happened during the time the flood was taking place, as well as what you were doing 30 minutes before it happened. Volunteers answer. Okay, phase three, thought phase. For the third phase, I'd like to ask you, what were the thoughts going through your mind as the flood was happening? What were you thinking about? Phase four. Now we proceed to the feeling phase. This is a time to validate any feelings you've had. What did you feel during the time the eruption or the flood was happening? And how are you feeling right now? Fifth phase. For the fifth phase, I'd like to know if there are any stresses you've experienced. Since the flood happened, do you notice any physical or psychological reactions within yourself? Okay. Phase six, which is the teaching phase. Now I would like to let you know that all that you felt were valid. We cannot compare an impact of a person's trauma to another because you're all unique individuals. I would like to explain how trauma works and how this can be dealt with. So during this time, you can teach whatever you need to teach them. And now for the last phase, which is the reentry phase, you can say something like, we are now at the last phase. Let's summarize so far what we have talked. What we have talked about. But before that, I would like to give you time if you have any questions. And demonstration ends there. So that's it. It's actually just a very quick run through of it. And I'm just posting this for anyone who would like this reference. Thank you so much.